Um, smash that like button. And we're here weekdays live, 10 a.m. to noon Eastern time. So keep it flowing, keep it going. And it's hump day. So here to get us through the Wednesday, we're 80.5 hours away to the Turnpike Trilogy. And, the tailgate takeover is going down with Gail Saunders this Sunday. And a lot of people are going to be asking, who's got the Herb? Glenn Erby from Eagles Newswire USA Today joining us here on the TFP. Glenn, man, playoff week. This is what we live for, right? How you doing today?
Good morning, Rick. I'm great now. After that one, I'm great. Good morning, man.
Hey, I know you've been waiting patiently in the virtual green room, and we appreciate that. You got much more content to get to. I'm sure you did 15 key players for this Giants and Eagles matchup. We'll get into some of that. But our previous guest, Martin Frank, made a good point, and I wanted to get your follow-up opinion with the Tank Commander, Wink Martindale. And this guy, nobody blitzed more than Tank during the regular season. I think it was about 50% of the time. Now, the Vikings, not so much, only 22%. We saw quarters coverage. I said, what the hell is going on with the G-Man? What's gotten into this team? But to Martin's point, like with the banged up Hurts, even though he's not on the injury report, they know that shoulder is one hit away from Minshew Mania time. So do you think that Martindale will get back to the blitz? Will we see what we saw last week, or will we maybe be left guessing this Saturday night?
No, I think you'll see about 48 to 52% blitz. I think you'll see that same shell coverage on the outside. I think teams are learning. I think the Giants learned from the first game, so you'll probably, even with the Dory Jackson and some other guys back, you'll probably see less man to man, but you'll definitely see Martindale blitz Hurts. You'll definitely see Martindale force Hurts to make a first or second read throw, and you'll definitely force him to get out the pocket and see what he can do with his legs as well. So you're accurate with that.
Okay, let me ask you this then, because, I saw half a dozen guys popped up on the Giants injury report yesterday, but as far as I'm aware of, Ojulari is the only one that's kind of questionable or could miss action. Now, last week, believe it or not, the Giants had 0 players on the injury report going into that Vikings. So while the Eagles are pretty healthy, I'm not sure anybody's fully healthy as much as the Giants are in terms of starters. Now, they haven't seen Leonard Williams yet this season, the Eagles. And they didn't see Sexy Dexter Lawrence last game either. Now, he called Jason Kelsey a nice little scrappy center yesterday. And you say, what the heck? I mean, it's mano a mano. This is big boy football now. All pro versus all pro. And I think Eagles fans sometimes take Kelsey for granted just how good he is. This is a 50-pound mismatch. I mean, they're both like 6'3", but Sexy Dexy, he weighs 50 pounds more than Kelsey. So if you want to see an incredible display of athleticism, understanding of angles, like watch Kelsey this Saturday night. But you talk about a heavyweight matchup affair. Kelsey, Sexy Dexy. I feel like this should be a one-off pay-per-view event.
Right. You hit it on the nail perfectly. I think you'll see a situation where the Eagles don't necessarily play with that much power up front. I mean, they are dominant, but you'll see moments where Kelsey's on the move, he's pulling. And so when you have Kelsey pulling, you'll have situations where Landon Dickerson or Sumalo would take his place. So they'll have situations and they'll have things in place to dole Dexter Lawrence off, to make him uncomfortable, to allow Kelsey to still get to the second and third levels like they like to do.
Yeah, and he's got 1 inch on Kelsey and a 50-pound weight difference, so he called him short. But now, this guy, believe it or not, he led all defensive linemen in the NFC, at least 68 tackles from the interior. That's pretty good. 7.5 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, 3 pass deflections. So he's got active hands, a pair of forced fumbles for a 350-pound man. This guy's got some heck of agility, man, and athleticism. Now, let me flip the script, because on the other side, this is a different G-Men team than we've seen in recent years. They got some players in the trenches. And Andrew Thomas, he made his first All-Pro this season, as did Camden's own Hassan Reddick. So you've got another All-Pro versus All-Pro in the trenches on the edge. And Reddick, man, this guy down the stretch, I know Bosa's probably going to win Defensive Player of the Year. But, man, I'd say over the last 5 or 6 games, Reddick has been in the same stratosphere, if not better. But this Andrew Thomas matchup now, this is going to be another heavyweight affair.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting one. I think in that first matchup where the Eagles won 48-22, they were able to get pressure off the edge, off of Thomas's side and Evan Neal's side. Thomas has improved; he's an All-Pro, but I think we'll want to watch Brandon Graham. We'll want to watch Josh Sweat and their matchup with Evan Neal. So if there is an edge, if there is a side, I think they'll go off of that right side where Neal is. Thomas is much improved, and we'll see how things play out with him and Reddick, like you said.
Glenn Erby, Eagles Newswire, USA Today. Occam's razor. I didn't forget your question, and what you asked earlier. We kind of addressed earlier in the show, but I'm gonna let Glenn have a crack at it. And I think the question was just in terms of the Eagles' offense, Glenn. Like, will you see the pre-Jalen Hurts injury offense? Will you see a Week 18 Eagles version of the offense where maybe some of the designed runs are out of the playbook? And I think more pointedly, what he wanted to know was, do you think that they'll play it conservative and limit Jalen's hits, or is everything on the table, empty out the kitchen sink?
I think it'll be a little bit of everything. I think it'll be on Jalen to not get himself hit, to not take some of those stupid hits. So I think some of those more designed runs where you see he's liable to get hit, where he's the sole ball carrier, you won't have that. Will they still run RPOs? You have to. You have to keep Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, and those guys honest. So you'll still see RPO game, but I think they'll open up the kitchen sink. I think they'll come out trying to pass the ball. I think they'll come out trying to test the Giants secondary and see what's there. But he'll run the ball. He'll have to run the ball. He'll have to be himself. It's a one and done situation. It's a tournament at this point, so there's no need to be conservative. You don't want him taking shots. You don't want him going head up with linebackers or things like that, but he has to play his game for them to be efficient.
At last glance, it was Daniel Jones who was more of a lethal dual threat in that Vikings game. 17 carries. We got somebody in the chat room saying, hey, Saquon Barkley is really not going to be a factor, and he hasn't been in recent trends with the Eagles. He's been pretty much a non-factor. Now, he only had 9 carries against the Vikings last week. He had 5 catches out of the backfield, so 14 touches. I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be surprised if the Giants double down on his touches and the G-men try. They have the time of possession now, 35 minutes to 25 minutes. That goes back to the Commanders' recipe for success. We saw the Colts try to do that. We saw the Bears try to do that. I think one of the other losses that the Eagles had this season was a team that just carried the ball and tried to milk the clock. To me, that's the only shot the Giants have, is keep the Eagles. They don't want to get into a track meet or a shootout. They want to milk the clock, run left, run right. Do you think it'll be more Daniel Jones or more Saquon Barkley? What do you think? Barkley really hasn't been much of a factor this year or last against the Eagles.
No, I think it'll be more Daniel Jones. I think anytime the Giants have had big explosive runs, it's been with Daniel Jones with either RPO style football or keeping the football. So I think it'll be a situation where they'll target Barkley in the passing game. And I think that can be a weakness at times. We know Kazir White has struggled in the passing game. TJ Edwards can be susceptible in the passing game. So I think from that standpoint, you'll see them target Saquon, Matt Breida in the passing game. But I think from a running standpoint, you'll see them try to get Daniel Jones out of the pocket, so that way you'll have situations where you'll have designed runs, you'll have schemed passes and things like that. So I think they'll try to pressure the Eagles on the edge. I think you'll see more Saquon Barkley as a passer, less as a rusher.
Yeah, and I saw you were on another show earlier this week talking about, hey, shut down Saquon Barkley, let Daniel Jones beat you because, hey, Isaiah Hodgins, Darius Slayton, Richie James. I mean, Darius Slay and James Bradbury should be taking care of business this Saturday night.
You're right. Whether it be NFLPA, whether it be the AP, you have 2 All-Pros at corner. If CJ Jordan Johnson doesn't get hurt, he's likely an All-Pro as he's a co-leader in interception. So when you have 3 potential All-Pros in your secondary, let them play. That's what most teams do. That's why Jonathan Gannon is supposed to be a head coaching candidate. That's why those guys make the big bucks. So you stack the line. If Barkley's going to kill you, he's going to kill you as a receiver or a pass catcher, but you can't let them gash you. If the Giants are able to gash the Eagles and run the ball, like you said, dominate, control possession, we're really going to have a problem on Saturday night.
You mentioned Jonathan Gannon. One thing that doesn't sit well with me, Glenn, is all these job interviews transpiring this week. I'm trying to win a chip, right? Like, if I'm Coach Nick Sirianni, and I know he said everything publicly that he's supposed to say, they're committed, they're all in, but I'm a little bit bothered inside. Like, if I'm trying to beat the Giants this Sunday, and like Jonathan Gannon now is going to go do 3 or 4 job interviews this weekend. Same thing with Shane Steichen. Oh, by the way, my quarterback coach, Brian Johnson, he might have an interview. I'm like, yo, Nick Sirianni's all in his office by himself preparing to win a playoff game. Like, I think the NFL needs to really look into changing this rule, because it's not fair to the teams that are DeMeco Ryans of the 49ers is in the same boat. I just think, like, yeah, what's the rush? Like, can we wait 25 more days? Let everybody have an equal opportunity to interview. Is it really going to kill you an extra 3 weeks? Like, to me, it's just an unnecessary disruption. You have a process. We've listened to Sirianni. He said it yesterday, I think, like, the process doesn't change. Well, yes, it does, because now suddenly your coaches are being disrupted in this process to go interview for another job. It just doesn't sit well with me. What do you make of this rule? What do you make of Gannon and Steichen? And what do you just make of the whole process?
Well, I mean, I think it's been a topic of conversation this week. I think you saw where Daboll, I don't know if he necessarily put his foot down, but they had a conversation, and you have a situation where Wink Martindale and Kafka are going to wait until after this ball game to interview. So
is that true? Is that right?
I don't know if he put his foot down or if they had a conversation, but both guys are going to wait to have their head coaching interviews. You know, they're going to schedule them for Sunday or Monday of this week coming up. So from that standpoint, it's been a topic of conversation. I know Steichen and Gannon both did their interviews via virtual, so it helps from that standpoint. But in terms of not being focused or anything like that, I think we won't know till Saturday. So we could talk about it. It'll be something to discuss. They both want to be head coaches, so I think from that standpoint, it's a situation where you have the head coach of, Sirianni. You have those two guys. You sit down, you come up with the formula, but you let them know that your focus has to be on this team advancing.
That's very, very fascinating to me. Two different approaches. I don't care who's calling the shots, whether it was Daboll's decision or Kafka and Martindale's decision. That's a different buy-in. That's a different way of commitment. And man, I'm a little bit surprised by that. That's the Daboll effect, man. And I saw Carter Coughlin, who's the special teams captain, to that point. He said, we've got a bunch of grinders. Nobody wants to leave the facility. Players, coaches. It's a different energy with Brian Daboll here. And I think you're seeing some of that. And I saw Robert Driscoll's point, like, let me clarify what I don't like about the rule. I don't think it should be all. I think the whole hiring process, I think the NFL should put a freeze on all 32 organizations. Line them up, schedule them, queue them up, like Sean Payton's going to meet Friday. Okay, well, push that back 3 weeks till after the Super Bowl. Schedule it. I think the whole league should have to wait. I don't think I just don't like the fact that we've played almost 300 games in the NFL. These guys are all on the same mission, and now suddenly we're just disrupting that process. And man, I'm telling you what, if God forbid the Eagles lose this game, that is going to be a big hot topic come Monday morning on this show, where the Giants coaches were fully committed and Gannon and Steichen, they were out with their other interests, and that's how it's going to be spun. I get it. That might not be the case, but that's how it's going to be spun.
I think that's an accurate assessment. I think it'd be nice. And I think if you had the numbers to go back and look over this past 20 to 12, 15 years to see how many number one seeds or high playoff seeds with coaches and head coaching candidates, how they fared in terms of the interview process while trying to get a team prepared. So I think from that standpoint, you're correct. I think if pushing Black Monday, that day where all the coaches get fired and things like that, I think pushing that back until the day after the Super Bowl wouldn't be the worst thing. I think it will probably make the hiring process more exciting, because at that point, every coach or every coaching prospect, has an advantage. I think the only guy having an advantage right now would be Sean Payton or guys that have been disqualified from the playoffs. So I think from that standpoint, you're correct and you're accurate.
All right, we'll see how that chimes in the chat room. Real Zeal, Occam's Razor, Dank Slasher, Decoy Gaming. Good to see you all. Keep it funky fresh. And hey, I respect everybody's opinion, but something just doesn't sit right with me on that. And I have a whole new perspective. Wow, that's refreshing, actually, to see Kafka and Martindale get it. I saw Ben Johnson also informed the Detroit Lions that he will remain. How about Jim Schwartz, our old friend? He's back. The boys are back. He goes over to the Cleveland Browns. He spent the last 2 years with the Titans as a consultant. So Jim Schwartz back in the fold here.
Yeah, Myles Garrett with that wide nine. Myles Garrett might rack up 22, 23 sacks next year. So that'll be something interesting. We'll see how it impacts their defensive tackles, linebackers, and their corners. But from the standpoint of Garrett and the edge rushers, I think there'll be something fierce on defense.
Let me ask you about Tyreek Cleveland. I should mention him since we're like an hour into the show. They added him to the practice squad yesterday, I saw. I remember him coming out of Florida. I think I might have saw him down at the Senior Bowl, but he was kind of a gadget player, wide receiver that ran a lot of end arounds and bubbles and screens. He was a 7th-round draft pick by the Denver Broncos a couple years ago. Didn't necessarily pan out. He played 23 games, only had 8 catches for 97 yards, but he did play 320 special team snaps. I see here. Is this something that could be a move for the playoffs, or is this kind of like more of a futures deal, Glenn?
It'll be something to see. I'd be shocked if he got, elevated for the playoffs. But like you said, in terms of Howie Roseman, always focused on roster building and making his team better. You have him on the practice squad. So at that point, when the season does end, you can sign him to a futures deal. You could be a solid gunner. He's a big physical receiver. So you have different ways of utilizing him. So I think from that standpoint, he's a guy to look for towards the future.
Okay, yeah, I got that off of the Eagles Newswire on USA Today, which you do a great job
Thank you,
of
Rick.
running and managing. And also you did 15 key players for the Eagles and Giants matchup. We're running out of time here, but give me some of your biggest impact players and key matchups or players to watch this Saturday night.
Well, I think it'll be all the guys that missed that first matchup. So we got to watch Dallas Goedert because I think he makes things easier for Jalen Hurts. I don't think Gardner Minshew took advantage of him as much as he should have during those 2 games. So he's definitely a player to watch for the Giants. Dexter Lawrence, Leonard Williams, Adoree Jackson. How do they impact the defense in terms of the passing games? How they'll play in coverage? Lane Johnson, he'll still need surgery, so his injury will be something to watch. He's had 2 weeks to rehab, but he's still going to play through pain. Jalen Hurts is going to play through pain. Boston Scott is a Giants killer, so you'll expect his snaps to rise. So next week it'll be something to talk about in terms of why Miles Sanders didn't play as much. Well, he shouldn't play as much. This is, Boston Scott always shines against the Giants. So we're just looking at guys like Gardner Johnson, Josh Sweat return, and all the guys that are coming back to impact this game and who didn't play in that second matchup.
All right, fair enough. Last one here before we let you go. 7.5, I think, was the last time I saw it. We know the week 18, I think it was a 6-point affair. Week 11, it was about a 26-point affair. So are you looking at this as more of what we saw in the first match, the second match? How will the Turnpike trilogy turn out on Saturday night?
A little bit of both. I think the Giants are better on both sides of the ball. They're confident. So from that standpoint, it won't be 48-22. But the Eagles are still the better team. They have, they have MVP caliber players on both teams. They have a potential MVP at quarterback. I think the Eagles win, pulling away 31-20.
Wow, 31 points. Okay. So there you have it. 11 points for the Eagles. Glenn Erby is breaking it down here. What will you have on the docket over at Eagles Newswire the rest of the week that the listening audience could look forward to?
Oh, everything we just talked about, breaking it down this big week. We'll do some talking about the other 3 teams, the other 2 teams that are in the NFC playoffs, just breaking things down. Jalen Hurts, how Lane Johnson will fare, how the Eagles will play on offense, pass ratio, run pass ratio, all those things. So we'll have it locked at eagles.newswire.com. The Cover 2 NFL for Twitter, Facebook, and I just appreciate it, Rick.
Yeah, well, you know what? Before I let you go, and we had a lot of people say they didn't like the Monday Night Football playoff game. My selfish, I love football. I'm never going to complain about an extra game. It looks like America has spoken. I see 30.6 million people tuned in to the Bucks and the Cowboys on Monday night. That was the most watched playoff game of the century. You got to go all the way back to 1999. But let me ask you, since you brought it up, I see the Cowboys and the 49ers as a coin toss affair. How does Glenn Erby see it?
I agree. I think, that the 49ers are the more physical team. I think, Brock Purdy hasn't flinched yet. So I think from that standpoint, with them playing at home, the momentum, I think they'll win a close one. But it could be a coin flip. It could be whoever has the ball last, in my opinion. I agree with what you're saying.
All right. Well, hey, we'll come back next week. We'll see how it all unfolds. We're looking forward to it. And thank you so much for the time here today, Glenn.
Thank you, Rick. You and Tone, as always. Appreciate you guys.
Absolutely. There he is. There he goes. Eagles Newswire, Glenn Erby. USA Today, usual suspect here on the Hump Day, episode 95 of the TFP with RIC. And I see some of you have to go to work. I'm sorry to hear it. Thank you, Real Zeal, and everybody else who smashed that like button. We're trying to get our weight up in the algorithm here. It is January 18th, 2023. The Eagles and Giants will link up at the link for the 181st matchup. Going back to 1933, the Eagles swept this season to make the all-time series 89 wins, 85 losses, and 2 ties. They are 2-2 all-time in the playoffs. And so we will see how it shakes down. We're now 80 hours away from the Turnpike Trilogy. The Real Zeal, Dank, Hearts on Fire, Phantom Devil, Tory B, Stephen J. Patton, Peter D, Decoy Game, and Dank Slasher. Everybody in the chat room, first time, long time, everyone in between, smash the like button. Now, we're going to take a quick break here in a second. Kayla Santiago is going to join the show after the commercial break, so don't go anywhere. You don't want to miss that. Now, I want to tell you guys something. We got a new sponsor on board for the show, and I haven't had time to even really talk through it with Tone, the super producer behind the scenes. So we're going to do it as a family here because that's what we are on the TFP with RIC. So starting tomorrow, hopefully, we'll get our act together and promote it more accordingly. But I want you guys to understand, part of the reason why I do this show is to kind of bring my network together. And I've been covering the NFL draft for 21 years over at the NFLDraftBible.com. We're now the official draft content provider for Sports Illustrated. And so we're excited with this partnership here on the JAKIB Sports YouTube channel. Again, 95th show, very early on. I mean, we're just getting started here on the Football Playbook. So appreciate all the love and support. And Sports Management Worldwide is an organization now I've been friends with, I'd say at least a decade. I've been doing business with now for at least, I'd say 5 or 6 years or so. And so you might see me pop up teaching a couple of football courses online over at SMWW. We had Mike Tenier yesterday. And by the way, I'll try to get into this later on in the show. Mike had a great article on New York Times this morning about the increase of quarterback sneaks, 275% increase in quarterback sneaks around the league. Guess who the number one team is at doing it? I'll get into that later on in the show, but he teaches the football analytics course. We have Dan Vandernat on every Thursday, and he'll join us tomorrow along with Emery Hunt, Eugene Chung, and the Biz is back, Chris Bizzagano from the Giants Insider. So we got 4 guests tomorrow, but like Dane Vandernat teaches the football GM and scouting course along with Rick Spielman, the former Vikings. So, one of the cool deals, probably my favorite event, and I promise the promo, this ain't really a promo. I'm just kind of giving you guys some perspective. One of my favorite events is the NFL Combine Conference. So those of you who work in football, who will be out in the combine, or maybe you're interested in getting involved in football, or maybe you just want to come out and hang with me. I don't know. It might not be the worst idea, but we do this football career conference. I've been a part of it, again, for the last half dozen years or so, and they've provided us with a great promo code to save $200 off of that event. It's my favorite event of the year. If you're interested, hit me up for more details offline, RIC at NFLDraftBible.com. But you can use the promo code DraftBible23. That's all lowercase, DraftBible23. And we're going to start doing some things with Sports Management Worldwide. So I'm excited about that. If you're somebody that just wants to understand the game, learn how to break down all 22, we're talking to Baldy about maybe doing a online course at Sports Management Worldwide. So Brian Baldinger will join us Friday, Football Friday. We got Brian Baldinger, Mike Gill, Coach Flip, and the NFL Pick'em. So the next two shows are probably going to be the best ever of all time. But the best segment we ever had is going to be coming up next, right after the commercial break, because Delmarva Sports Director Kayla Santiago, part of the NFL Draft Bible Familia, will join us. So smash that like button. We'll be back right after this.